I'm Kieran Anderson, Group Publisher here at Applied Radiology, and I'm here in the booth today with Dr. Erin Simon Schwartz, who's Chief of the Department of Neuroradiology at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and both a longtime board member and our former Editor-in-Chief at Applied Radiology. Dr. Schwartz, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And equally important here is we have Dr. Dana Smetherman with us as well. Doctor, you're a diagnostic radiologist specializing in breast imaging and the current CEO of the American College of Radiology. It is an honor to have you in our booth with us today.
I'm just pleased that we were able to make it work out and to be able to talk with you guys today.
You know, today we're going to talk a little bit about these recently released version 2025 BI-RADS, the breast imaging reporting and data system, and the definitive guide really for standardizing breast imaging. Is that right?
Absolutely. And we, the last version was version 5, and that was actually in 2013. So this is a big deal for the breast imaging community. We are really excited about it. And we now, instead of calling it an atlas, we're calling it a manual, because it's really more than an atlas. It's also much bigger. It's like almost 900 pages, many, many more images. So yes, we're really excited, and I think the breast imaging community is really excited too.
I'd love to ask you how you see these new BI-RADS sort of shaping breast imaging practices over the next 5 to 10 years.
So a lot of things have changed since 2013. So we've been able to include new modalities that have come into common practice. Things like contrast enhanced mammography. Also, digital breast tomosynthesis was really just starting out in 2013, and so we have expanded a lot of what we've done in the digital breast tomosynthesis realm. Also, some of the other modalities that we use, things like MRI and breast ultrasound, have really evolved and grown. And so in the breast MRI section, for instance, we now have some special information about abbreviated breast MRI, or another technique that's called diffusion weighted imaging. So, and also, even if we look at the management, 2013, the definitive treatment for most patients was going to be surgery, but now many patients will get chemotherapy before their surgery. So we have what's called category 6. Those are patients who have had a diagnosed cancer, but now we'll have the option to include those patients who maybe have gotten chemotherapy but haven't gotten surgery. So I think it's been a very holistic update to the BI-RADS. Lots of new descriptors, including new modalities, new auditing and outcomes, and a lot of things really to reflect modern breast imaging. I think also, we're talking a little bit about, how is this going to work in the next 5 to 10 years as things continue to change. We're viewing this as predominantly a digital version. Back in 2013, we thought of it as predominantly a print version, and if there were changes, you'd actually have to get those mailed to you and insert them into the book, and now those kind of updates are going to be much, much easier. Surprisingly, though, we do still have some people who like the print, so we do, if you're out there and you want the print version, you will be able to get it. It's a pretty heavy book, so but if that's what you want, we have that for you too.
900 pages.
900 pages, yes.
So you're obviously incredibly well known as a great proponent of advocacy in radiology, not only in policy, but in practice. And how has the feedback, the advocacy from women's imagers and breast imaging specialists affected this new version?
So really appreciate that question. I think we have really tried to listen to the feedback of our members of the breast imaging community to make these updates and to incorporate the way they're practicing breast imaging today. So a tremendous amount of feedback, lots and lots and lots of comments, because I think it's very important that what we put out, to your point, is something that's practical and can be implemented into practice, that works for practices, radiologists, for patients too. Another big thing in breast imaging is that we have for years had not only the physician's report, but also the lay letters. And we know that the Mammography Quality Standards Act got updated and some of that nomenclature changed. And so we've done what we can to make sure that that's homogeneous as well, that it's standardized across what the MQSA is requiring and what we have in our standards. So hopefully all of that feedback is incorporated. And as I said, I haven't read all 900 plus pages myself yet, but it really does seem like we really listen to the comments and the feedback of the community.
That's great.
So
That's great. I have a question about the BI-RADS, and sort of given this new, the new BI-RADS and the emphasis really, because you mentioned modality neutral, MRI, ultrasound, you mentioned a bunch of them there. From an auditing and outcomes kind of perspective and monitoring it across all of these different modalities, what steps is the ACR taking to really ensure compliance and quality, really, at the end of the day, industry-wide, and how will this be tracked, I guess, through maybe a national mammography database or something to that effect?
So the ACR already has the what we call the NMD, or the National Mammography Database. So I think this gives us a really powerful way for us to be able to track how patients are doing, how practices are doing. We've made some updates, like including method of detection, both in the BI-RADS Atlas and in the National Mammography Database. So hopefully these updates will make it just as easy as it is now for practices to have a very standardized way that they look at the outcomes of the work that they are doing. And I will say breast radiology really has been kind of ahead of other specialties and looking at things like, we screen a patient, how commonly do the individual radiologists bring that patient back for additional imaging? What's the outcome of that? If you recommend a biopsy, how many of those patients wind up having a cancer? So I do think breast imaging, now it's a little easier in breast imaging than perhaps pediatric neuroradiology, because we're looking at one organ and basically one disease process. But I think that kind of all of this works in lockstep with the things that the American College of Radiology does. We set standards. We try to have standardized reporting so that it's understandable across different practices, that everybody knows what we're talking about. And then we do track those outcomes, and we make it easy for practices, if they're tracking our outcomes, to then comply when they when they have to submit for MQSA and things like that. So
I know it's great you mentioned that consistency and standardization, because that has to be taken in the context, of course, of all these evolving technologies, right? Contrast-enhanced ultrasound, contrast-enhanced mammography, MRI, all of the current and future AI assists that will be available for practicing radiologists. So what is the plan for the BI-RADS sort of balancing, that need for stability so that you can do your long-term data collection with being flexible and nimble enough to incorporate new modalities, diagnostic refinements, all those sorts of things?
So I think it's a great point. Because things are going to continue to evolve and change and hopefully get better for patients over time. One thing we have done is to try to really standardize the reporting across different modalities as well. So I think that will help. But as new things come along, luckily, I think the ACR has a pretty robust way of keeping track of what are the new technologies that are coming. We have a lot of committees in our different commissions, and we can, here's a new technology. Oh, it looks like they're asking for a CPT code. It's commonly enough done. Okay, this is a real thing. Is it commonly enough done now that we need to start incorporating it into things like the BI-RADS? So I think for us, we kind of have a very unique but fortunate position that we have insight into so many different parts of the radiology ecosystem, the governmental regulations and how those are evolving, the economic side, and is this new technology really promising enough that maybe we're going to have to find a way to pay for it, and then kind of monitoring how that gets incorporated into practice, and then back to trying to get the feedback and the comments. And I also think with the digital version, hopefully those updates will be simpler for everybody and easier to accomplish.
Right. So as we start to wrap up here a little bit, I'd love to hear, your perspective as really the leader at the ACR, what your vision is for leveraging BI-RADS not really only as a reporting standard, but also really as a tool for global radiology education. I mean, we live in a global world and we need to be able to practice and deliver care across, you know, really everywhere. Potentially reducing disparities in breast cancer and diagnosis and outcomes, especially as I mentioned in regions that might be under-resourced.
Right. Well, so, it is really an interesting thing how widespread the BI-RADS is. I was in Cuba, and sure enough, they were using the BI-RADS to report. So I think at a certain level, having that standardization helps everyone. And having everybody have a really clear idea of, this is where good practice is today. I will tell you that the enthusiasm for the BI-RADS announcement that we made yesterday in the new version is most assuredly not confined to the United States. So we have the privilege of being able to meet with leaders from other radiology societies around the world. And sure enough, the first group that we met with after the announcement came out wanted to know, well, when is it going to be translated? In this case, it was the Brazilian Radiology Society. When is it going to be translated into Portuguese? And it was funny because one of the things that came out of that, I said, well, actually, AI can probably help us with that, with large language models. So, and there will still need to be human beings, but at the time of the last BI-RADS, that required human being translators and medical translators to do all of that work. So I was like, this is a place where actually AI and large language models really might be able to make things faster and more accessible for everyone. So,
absolutely. And while we have you, I know we were talking about BI-RADS, but is there anything else that the ACR has been working on or that people have been asking you about here at RSNA that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, so I will say one thing that we've been working on, and that every group that we've met with, and when I've been in the booth, people really have wanted to talk to us about, is our basically AI monitoring portfolio. So, as we've talked about, the ACR has been involved in quality and safety, and as new modalities come around, making sure that we start out with practice parameters and technical standards and then develop accreditation. And for us, we really view AI as another modality, and we feel like our role to make sure that it is implemented in ways that are safe and everything done correctly and very well controlled has been I think very, very important to us. And so one thing people have asked us a lot about is what is the ACR doing? And we've been very busy since 2017 when we founded the Data Science Institute. I'm very grateful for those very forward-thinking leaders. We've been working on this for now almost a decade. So one of the first things that we did is something that's called AI Central, which is basically a repository of all of the FDA-approved AI products in the United States. So that's a great reference for people, and it's available to everyone. We actually took it out from behind the firewall recently so that it's available to everyone. So if you want to implement some AI products, you can go and look at there. We have model cards that are like nutrition labels for the different products, and some of them have the transparent AI check, which means that they actually have been transparent about what are the demographics of the patients they were tested on. So that's one foundational piece. Last June, and I can't believe it hasn't even been a year and a half, we introduced what we call Arch AI, which is our recognition program. And this goes through what are really the pillars or the building blocks for a department or a practice if they want to put AI in place. So things like, do you have a governance structure? Who needs to be on that team? Because I think there's by many there's a sense of excitement or urgency. We got to get this implemented. But what problem are you trying to solve? What use case do you think you need in your practice to use AI for? So we have that, and we've had great uptake with that in the United States. Lots of different departments. Some people look at it and say, oh, we don't have this yet. We need to work on that. Others are like, wow, we have all of these things, and then they get the recognition. And then finally, we have the first national registry for AI, which is called Assess AI. And so the way that works is a practice has their data and it's de-identified on their side. So the ACR doesn't get anything that could identify a patient. And we basically get their radiologist report, and we get the AI output, and we look to see what the concordance is between those two. So say your practice has 90% concordance for this algorithm in your patient population, you can track that over time, and then what if all of a sudden it drops to 70%? Well, something's happened. So the site will get that report back. They can go back and re-identify and look and see, oh wow, did we acquire a new hospital? Maybe it's a children's hospital, and this is not an algorithm that was ever tested in a pediatric population, or maybe we had a new technologist that changed the protocol, or we got a new CT scan from a different vendor. And so it lets them figure out on their side, because we know that, not just the typical model drift that can happen, but sometimes it's an inadvertent thing that changed the way that it works. So again, for us, that safe, effective, responsible use of AI is very important to us. And I'll add one last thing, because I know we talked about disparities. We have intentionally built that on the backbone of ACR Connect, which is the platform that we use for all of our registries and that we use for a lot of our accreditation. So even very small practices have our accreditation, in particular mammography accreditation. So that should make it accessible for all different types of practices.
That is fabulous. I mean, lots of great tools, lots of great news coming out of the ACR, and such a delight to have you sit down with us, Dr. Dana Smetherman. I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Well, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity. It was an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it was our pleasure. Thank you.